If you're looking for high quality black lesbian role models, S. Diane Bogus is definitely one to note down. I once mentioned Mouths of Rain, an anthology of black lesbian thought. Now this includes essays, poetry and other writings by black lesbian feminists, including S. Diane Bogus, but also Audre Lorde, Cheryl Clarke and Bettina Love. Now you can get this book all over the place. My advice, get it. It's very much worth having. I also previously mentioned S. Diane Bogus's essay on the Black Bulldagger. Now her monograph is called The Myth and Tradition of the Black Bulldagger. You can find this in the anthology Dagger on Butch Women. Now that is again a collection of different writings by different lesbians. It's a fantastic book. We'll get into that a little bit later on. But S. Diane Bogus's monograph is found on page 28. And Dagger on Butch Women is a book that has 232 pages. So just to make sure you got the right book. You can also view this monograph via the Internet Archives. Here's a couple of excerpts from that piece. So this is The Myth and Tradition of the Black Bulldagger by S. Diane Bogus. She described the bulldagger or the mask as the woman-made woman, her self's own escort, her own self's counsel in chief, the equal of men. In this she is very unlike Sappho, for Sappho in the end is an ambiguous figure, very distant in time, and very much the image men most prefer in woman, the delicate beauty in silks, harmless, hardly man's equal, even if she knows a million thrusts of the offspo. Now the offspo is a dildo. The Black Bulldagger would never give them a show, and no one would ever know the ways of her loving, what skills she had with women, what art, what pleasures in her hands, what practice in her tongue. Whatever augmentations to her desire, she never told. She kept her own counsel. She went for bad. I'm sorry, but she went for bad is the most epic mic drop ever. The strength of the Black Bulldagger lies in the self-asserting her story of our pasts. Any black woman with character enough to cry, "Look at my arm, I have ploughed and planted and gathered into barns, and no man could head me. And ain't I a woman?" has the same power or potential for power as the Black Bulldagger. She, like Sojourner Truth, has had to struggle for her place in our minds, against our weakness and fear, our fuzzy sense of our lesbian past, our black history, and against internalized homophobia. But because we have not seen her humanity, nor her loving, and have only begrudged her strength, power, and woman-loving nerve, we cried out, "Bulldagger, Bulldagger," hardly knowing the words were an incantation to our own hidden black histories. Bulldagger, just what does this word mean? Where does it come from? It is related, as Judy Gran speculates in Another Mother Tongue, to Boudica. Yes, apparently we've been pronouncing Boudica wrong. Boudica, the Iceni queen of Celtic history, who rode on Rome against the colonization. In AD 61, she reigned as priest, goddess, and queen, performing ceremonial rites wherein bulls were regularly killed on the altar of sacrifice. The blood ran down into an embankment or dike that drew it away. In any case, her descendants and others like them gave to lesbians a character rebellious, armed, masculine, warrior-like, and dangerous. Boudica's name, like her wondrous but infamous defiance of Rome, was driven underground, not to be spoken, not to be remembered. African-American lesbians have, in our ancient lesbian past, the fierce Dahomean Amazons of West Africa who were, during the Songhai influence over that region from 1464 to 1591, the most learned, the richest, and the most sought-after people on the planet, if not for their knowledge and riches, then for their slaves. These were Amazons, as Audre Lorde wrote in the Cancer Journal, who severed their right breasts in order to free their bow arms for the fight against enslavement. We also have Queen Calafia, namesake of California, who, according to legend, was a 13th century leader of a tribe of black Amazons who ruled the land without the presence of a single man. The Black Bulldagger is a link to our ancient and recent black woman-loving past, and the predecessor of today's black lesbian. Moreover, the Black Bulldagger, unlike the black lesbian, was a loner in both myth and reality. She had no politic other than her daily life. She had no community other than that which she discovered. She had no women-loving role models other than men. She had no books, no records, save those that she hid. No cafe, unless you include the out-of-the-way bar or the house party. And she had no festivals. But the Black Bulldagger survived in our language, in our imaginations, and in our lives. If we were to assign her an era, that era would begin in the 1800s. The 1920s were her best years. And this is Mabel Hampton, a lesbian activist and Renaissance dancer. She also contributed to the Lesbian Her Story archives. The Black Bulldagger's American antecedents were women such as gun-toting Mary Fields, 1832, or Cora Anderson, 1840, who passed as male and married a woman. She even had intellectual counterparts who were less assertive black women-loving women than she. They include Alice Dunbar Nelson and Angela Weld Grimke, the artistic branch of the women-loving line. But the Black Bulldagger is not an artist in our imaginations. She is a creature made in the image of man. She is the doorway through which many of today's conveniently labelled black lesbians have passed as studs, as sweet men. The Black Bulldagger has also been women like Ma Rainey and Bessie Smith, Mabel Hampton and Annie Lee Grant, a Mississippi Bulldagger, who lived as a man for 15 years. This was Jim McHarris. Jim McHarris, his birth name was Annie Lee Grant. Through 8 decades, the presence of the Black Bulldagger has waned, but has never disappeared. Our reverence for, fascination with, interest in the bull is as honest as the day we were born. It is as old as the word God, or El, which according to the Woman's Encyclopedia of Myths and Secrets, means bull god, or father of men. And it was Bill Pickett, black cowboy extraordinaire, whose magnificent and creative rodeo feats with bulls reminded us of our connection to the ancient relations of blacks and bulls. In the 1920s, black people who had migrated from the Midwest farms and southern parts of the United States to the north had the rare and uplifting treat of seeing Bill Pickett in the one and only movie of its black kind, The Bulldagger. There he was, on the great silver screen, larger than life, leaping from horses with the greatest of ease, wrestling bulls and calves to the ground in record time, manhandling them in the most rope-fangled fashion, and creating, for the new American West, a rodeo event that even lives on today. His feat credited him with the origin of the word bulldogger. The word was then appropriated by other cowboys who had observed the behavior of bulldogs who'd get a hold of something and refuse to let it go. Once we had seen that movie, we talked about Bill Pickett, and we talked about his exotic life, and we said bulldogger whenever we could. We used it as a term of reference for any man's prowess, especially if he was bullish about women. We created similes using like a bulldogger to describe how fiercely, adroitly, or strongly a task was performed. The word bulldogger had its way with our imaginations. Then somewhere at some time, somebody crossbred that admiration with hate, or with comedy, when he saw one bull mount another and go hey-ho in forceful stabbing motions, or when some woman did a thing with the unabashed aptitude of a bulldogger. In the twinkling of an eye, or perhaps in the time it takes to spread gossip, the word bulldogger became bulldagger. The Black Bulldagger believed she had a right to love women, and she lived that right fearlessly. She believed she had the right to walk the streets day or night unmolested, and she did, conquering the fear in her heart. She believed she had the right to defend herself and her chosen, to assert herself, to govern herself. The Black Bulldagger did not lack the courage of her convictions. She was self-defining, self-escorting, self-reliant. She was proud, manly, possessive, and strong. She was streetwise and recognized for herself when she wanted to be. Now that was a brilliant excerpt from S. Diane Bogus's monograph in Dagger on Butch Women. Get your hands on that book. Now also in the same book, because it's an anthology, as I said before, this is another excerpt here. Loving butchness amounts to an attraction to what's not supposed to be there. Female maleness, female masculinity, these simplistic ways of reading butch energy do not entirely miss the mark, but they do mislead. Maleness isn't male on a female, honey. It's something else again. A horse of another colour. Something our gender-impoverished language doesn't offer us words to describe. I mean, it's just fantastic. I wish the front cover reflected the diversity that's inside, but it's a classic case of don't judge a book, right? So inside there's a rainbow, excuse the pun, of accounts of the lesbian experience. This book was published in the 90s. This book is fast becoming a rare find, and it's expensive now. But if you can get it, because, you know, this is something for our history, for her story. Like, we need our own track record here. And we have it, it's there in plain sight, but people don't really read anymore. I would advise you to cherish the book. You can also view it on the Internet Archives for free. I'll put links up on my YouTube. But let's dive into S. Diane Bogus, because her work in black lesbian history and literature is very important.